Not so fast.
Okay, are we ready? Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Oversight Committee of the City Council, and this is our regularly scheduled meeting for Thursday, June 9th, 2022. Welcome to everybody who is with us today. Glad to see you. We have 4 items on the agenda today, and I always like to remind everyone at the beginning of our meeting that we are time limited because of another meeting that is scheduled later with the Planning Commission. So we'll try to move through everything in as efficient manner as we possibly can. So our first agenda item today is discussion regarding the smoking ordinance. And we have a no smoking ordinance on the books in the city of Norman, but we have guests today from the Cleveland County TSET Healthy Living Program. Allie, and please tell me how you say your last name.
Quillage.
Quillage, okay. And Sarah
Sandcack.
Sandcack, okay. So we're really happy to have them here today. They have been working with municipalities in Oklahoma to move forward with a Norman, in this case, Norman tobacco-free city-owned property ordinance. We have some things in place, but they have some information that they would like to share with us today. So if you'd like to go ahead, please do.
We have a presentation. I
Okay.
sent it over to Brenda. Do you know if I need
Okay.
to present it or?
It's on your iPad.
Okay. Yeah, I have it.
Yes.
So is it loaded for her? Because I do have, oh, here it is.
He hears everything.
Rise to the rescue.
You got it.
Put up whatever was up
I need
there.
like a cape. To
What
make
would-
that more dramatic.
Yes, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
It's not as Bruce then.
All right, thank you guys so much for having us today. Like Lee said, we have been working really hard. Norman's got a great start on this ordinance, but we do have some suggestions and some things that we think could make a huge difference here. So again, like she said, we're a TSET Healthy Living Program, so we're just kind of focusing on the current tobacco-free city-owned property environment and what we can do to kind of just improve that a little bit. We've got some statistics in here. I can run through them if you would like. If not, you guys can feel free to take a look at them afterwards. But the main thing is that tobacco is a harmful product. Secondhand smoke is a harmful situation. In Oklahoma, more than 21% of adults smoke. And tobacco causes cancer, heart disease, respiratory illnesses, and has at least 250 harmful chemicals and 60 known carcinogens. So some of the things of why we would want to make sure that everything is tobacco free. Overall, I'll let you guys read this. It's a lot, but we just want to make sure we're encouraging citizens of Norman to be tobacco free, and by leading them in the efforts, it creates an environment where they feel safe to make those decisions for themselves, as well as for their family members and their friends and family, especially their children. So one of the main things that we want to talk about is that Norman has their tobacco-free city-owned property ordinance, but it does not include the parks of Playgrounds and Parks or Westwood Golf Course. So that's been one of our main goals, is to get those included, as well as some other, I'll get to those in a second, some other highlights there. So our kind of history with this, in 2015, 2016, we met with Mayor Rosenthal then to discuss the policy. Her main concerns were that we wouldn't have any way to enforce this. She asked that we collect data. We went to the golf course, and overall, most people mentioned that they either didn't care or they didn't want it to be allowed within the golf course. And the staff mentioned that they didn't want to allow the tobacco use due to the mess that it causes. They have to go through and pick up the litter that follows behind the golfers, whether it's from cigars or the little packets or dip. People just flick it out onto the ground, or just cigarette butts in general. So we have continued to meet with Norman Parks and council members over the years, and we didn't try to pass another policy again until 2019. And we've met with Mayor Clark many times, and we've attended the Oversight Committee before. It probably was not us. We've had a lot of predecessors before us, Allie Cristelli, Rita Babick. Those are probably some of the more recent names you would know. So we're here again with some more survey results and some suggestions and some benefits to bringing this in overall, just outside of the health benefits as well. So first off, healthy incentive grants for communities. Norman has received about $50,000 from these. It was back in 2012 and 2013. Since then, the criteria for these incentive grants have been updated, and the maximum funding is $150,000. So by updating this tobacco ordinance, it would make Norman eligible for at least $100,000 more. So that could go towards parks, anything. There's a couple little nuances in there that you have to use the money specifically for, but I know that Norman has a lot of projects going on within the parks and the communities, so that $100,000 could go towards that. So that makes a huge difference, I think. And that grant criteria will be available after July 1st, so we would be happy to help working on applying for that as well. That's something we offer there. So the funding is determined on a couple of criteria there. You have to adopt an ordinance that prohibits smoking and the use of tobacco products in all indoor and outdoor owned property. So that would mean we'd have to include the parks, parking lots, and the golf course. And the level or strength of the worksite wellness policy, which we have all of the criteria and what would need to be updated or included. We could help with that. We know what needs to be done in order to get that updated. To be qualifying for these grants, and the community actions achieved by a community toward an environment of wellness. So just the overall movement towards making a healthier community. And then the population size. So Norman is one of the larger populations, so that would put them in the $100,000 range to be able to work towards that.
So I will go over our survey results. So we conducted a survey within Cleveland County on their opinion on tobacco use. So the first question was, secondhand smoke means smoke breathed in from lighted or heated tobacco or plant product being smoked by others. This could be from cigarettes, cigars, pipes, etc. Do you believe that secondhand smoke is harmful to your health? And so out of 12 responses, 100% answered yes. So they believe that secondhand smoke is harmful. The next one is, in Oklahoma, cities and towns can pass policies that make public city-owned property, including parks and recreational spaces, smoke-free, tobacco-free, and vape-free. These policies do not cover privately owned property like businesses, homes, etc. Do you believe all city property in your community should be smoke-free, tobacco-free, and vape-free? So we had 83%, so 10 people said yes, 8% said no, and 8% said not sure. Do you smoke, vape, or use other tobacco products every day, some days, or not at all? 92% answered not at all, so 11 out of the 12, and only one person said every day. So we conducted another survey within the Westwood Golf Course. So these were conducted within the visitors that went to the golf course. And so the first question is a series of questions where they had to indicate if they agreed or disagreed with the following statements. Everybody visiting Westwood Golf Course has the right to clean air. So 10 out of the 10 answered that they agree with that. Secondhand smoke bothers me when visiting Westwood Golf Course. 8 said yes or agree, and 2 disagreed with that statement. Tobacco litter is a problem at Westwood Golf Course. 3 agreed, and 7 said not sure. Westwood Golf Course should be smoke-free. 8 agreed, 1 disagreed, and 1 said not sure. Westwood Golf Course should be tobacco-free. 7 agreed with that statement, 2 disagreed, and 1 said not sure. And finally, Westwood Golf Course should be vape-free. 8 answered agree, 1 said disagree, and 1 said not sure. The next question states, if Westwood Golf Course was smoke, tobacco, and vape-free, how often would you visit? 50% said just as often, and 50% said more often. If Westwood Golf Course was smoke, tobacco, and vape-free, how likely would you be would you be to purchase a membership? 50% said just as likely, and 50% said more likely. Do you smoke, vape, or use other tobacco products every day, some days, or not at all? 7 out of the 9 said not at all. 1 said not, some days, and 1 said every day. And so these are some quotes that we pulled from some of the golf course users. It's pretty rare to see someone out there smoking. If anything, maybe there's 1 or 2 regulars, but that's about it. We actually had one of our guys quit smoking because he has COPD. I actually really hate the smell of cigarette smoke, so it would be great if they passed no smoking policy. I didn't even know that the golf course was one of the only city-owned properties where people could smoke. I did not realize you could vape or use tobacco products here. And finally, we want clean air. We value it. And these are some images that we took from the golf course. So there are signs at the clubhouse where it says no smoking and the breathe easy sign.
So basically, you can't smoke near the clubhouse, but once you get onto the course, you can. So we've got we sent in your current policy to TSET, and we've got a team that reviews that and updates it according to our current model policy, which is decided by what we call the center. It's a government-run program. So the first thing would be to include the parking lots of parks and playgrounds, and then Westwood Golf Course to include all of those city-owned properties. The second thing, we would have to add in some prohibited conduct, so tobacco products and vapor, and then we would need to include the outdoor properties, parks and recreational areas. So the sentences in the italicized are what we have developed to be able to be put into the ordinance to bring it up to standards to meet those qualifications for each element. So if the ordinance is missing something to bring it to model policy, we have put in here what you would need to bring it up to that. So then the other thing would be applies to all vehicles owned by the municipality. So we've also got a statement in there about that. Required signs. So this is another positive for partnering with us, is if we were to update this and get this to a model policy, we would be able to fund all of the signs that would need to go up on the properties, any that needed to be updated, or new ones that need to be put up as well. And we would need to put in the 15 inches by 15 inches in size, the weather resistant outdoor signs in all of the parks and playgrounds, and including the new locations if we were to add them in. Penalties and enforcements. In order to be a model policy, we would need to include some fines for violations and designate a group or person responsible for enforcement. So we've got in here that we've got a couple italicized statements here that would meet the requirements for those elements. It would be up to the city of Norman, you guys, to decide who you would want to enforce and what you would want your fines and policy fines to be. The only requirement here is that it cannot exceed $100, which is the state law. So the fines can exceed $100, but anything up to that point or below it, you can have the fine. And then possession of a lighted tobacco product in violation of this article is a nuisance. So you do have this in there already, but we would be able to add in some of the abatement procedures following that in order to kind of cover all of the bases there. And then if we were to include the tobacco products and the vapor products, so not just smoke-free, do tobacco products, so that's like the dip and the little pockets, and the vapor products, then we would be able to add in some enforcement and fine qualifications as well into the policy. And then the final thing would be the statutory construction and severability. That does need to be included as well. That might be missing, might be included somewhere else in the ordinance, but what we received, the information we received, is that it is missing that. So that's kind of all we had to share with you guys today, just some current standings from citizens. I think the $100,000, you guys, if we were to update the ordinance, you think you would have a really good chance of getting that money. We would be happy to help with that application as well. So you have any questions immediately or anything that you want to share?
I'm just curious, when did you conduct the survey and why was the sample size so small?
Yeah, yep. I wondered if you guys would ask that. So we had to get these surveys developed by TSET, so it took a little bit of time to get those back from them. We conducted them at the community events we were a part of. There were low attendance numbers. Some people just did not want to participate, so the numbers aren't that as high as we wanted to. Some golfers, when we were at the golf course, were a little upset with us for asking the questions, so we just stepped away. We didn't want to, cause a scene. So sample sizes, we would have loved to have them higher, but it took a while to get the survey, and then just people didn't want to take it, or we just didn't have enough people around to take them.
And when did you conduct it? Was it at one sitting or?
It was multiple settings.
Okay.
Within the past, I would say 3 or 4 months.
3 or 4 months,
So
yeah.
they're very recent.
So we went to a couple events within Andrews Park. We went to the golf course actually this morning. We tried to go yesterday, but that rain kind of stopped us. I wasn't
Glad you didn't have
don't
to
love
go.
my job that much. And Sarah went a couple weeks ago at the golf course and spent a couple hours there. But the general survey was just at some events over the last 3 or 4 months within the parks events, like the senior centers and.
So this was done fairly recently, and since both of you have joined the staff, because I
Yes.
know there has been a lot of discussion about this in the last few years, and there has been turnover, just like every sector is experiencing probably post-pandemic. So, okay. Well, I just was curious about that, and then I guess this is a question for city staff. How are we enforcing the ordinance that we do have? Do we have a fine?
Yes. Let me see if I can pull it up. It's prohibited by section 10-503 of our code, smoking in indoor places, public places, and we just model state law right now. I believe the fine is up to $500. We also have another ordinance that prohibits the sale of tobacco products, or use of tobacco products by minors. That was changed a couple of years ago to match federal law, so that's not just minors, it's really 21 and under, or under 21 now, cannot be in possession. So we have fines for both of those. Both of those are up to $500 maximum fine. I don't think we get a lot of municipal court charges for that. Used to in the schools, we would get some. I think vaping is the biggest problem they have right now. And there's actually a state law that was adopted and will go into effect November 1st that will not allow us to write tickets for vaping. Okay. It gives that authority to ABLE. So I'm not sure how that will be enforced because they don't seem to have the kind of staff for that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. ABLE is a little understaffed. In order for them to enforce it, though, it does have to be included within the policies and ordinances. So we just updated with Lexington. Theirs was 18, and ABLE Commission could not come in and enforce age 21 until they updated their local jurisdiction ordinance to age 21.
Yeah, and we've already updated ours.
Yeah.
So that was my next question. And then is there anything that you see in this presentation that is in conflict with anything else we need to be aware of at the moment?
I don't think so. I was looking at the state law because I knew there had been some movement there.
Yeah, there's been some really recent changes in the youth access laws.
Interesting changes, I will say. It's
Shocker.
already prohibited within 25 feet of an entrance to a building. It's prohibited indoors, of course. But parks is kind of in the last holdout. And when this was initially adopted in 2008, this was a project I had early on working here. And it was very controversial at that point too. We talked about it to ban smoking in public because at that point we didn't have any of these ordinances, that banned it within 25 feet of the entrance and things like that. So it's just not ever gotten very far, I think, although it's been discussed multiple times.
Yeah.
And I don't really see an issue with it. I don't know you know, at the golf course, we have a position.
Okay. Okay, well, let's address these other questions, and then I want to absolutely, glad you're here, see what you have to say about it. Okay. Councilmember Studley.
I was curious, I just want to clarify, you did say that if we pass this, that you guys would pay for all of the signage?
Yep.
And then, let's see, the only, this is just, I quit smoking a long time ago, so I'm not really worried about it, but just as a smoker, previous smoker, like, I would personally be annoyed if someone told me I couldn't smoke in my car. If you're telling me I can't smoke indoors and I can't smoke in the park, and I'm going to my car to sit in my car to smoke in the parking lot, and then now I can't do that, I probably wouldn't be real happy with that.
Within your personal vehicles, you can,
In the parking lot, in the personal vehicle?
as long as the windows are not, like, you're not creating a secondhand smoke environment.
I mean, I don't want to trap myself in my car with my own cigarette smoke or cigar smoke, though. You know
Well,
what
I
I'm
think
saying?
the
So-
biggest issue is like if an individual were smoking in their car at a playground, and obviously, you know, if there's
The
wind
kids,
or whatever,
right.
the kids will be affected by that.
The other part to that is just, I know a lot of golfers because I work with doctors daily, and they golf a lot, and they drink on the golf course, and they smoke their cigars, and that's what they do. So I am also curious to see what Jason has to say about that, but that's all I got.
Well, I mean, today, you know, we were there this morning for about 3-ish hours, and they were doing their league scramble. Yes, I'm not familiar with golf. And only one person we saw was smoking, and he wasn't even smoking in the right place. But there were 40 plus people there.
Yeah.
So there was only one.
Well, the fact you said it's 21% of Oklahomans now smoke, that's reduced quite a bit from, you know,
Yeah.
from even 5 years
Yes,
ago, 10
we
years
will not,
ago.
the progress will not go unnoticed. We love seeing the progress there, yeah, absolutely.
Councilmember Schuler.
The questions that I wrote down were the ones that you covered about the survey, and then also the funding of the signage. And then I just kind of have an anecdotal, I guess, experience. When OU's campus went tobacco-free a number of years ago, I know that there was some conversations about, like, well, where would people go, and, you know, employees and things like that. And so, I mean, what we notice is that they walk just north to Campus
Cross
Corner,
the street.
and they
Yeah.
cross
Answer
the
corner.
street, and yeah. So, I just, you know, caution us to say that, like, we do this, it will literally just be across the street and win. So, I do think that this is important. As a non-smoker my whole life and someone with asthma, like, I do think that it is important to be protecting individuals and others from secondhand smoke and all of that. But just being clear
Yes,
that, like,
absolutely.
people will walk across the street and then do it where it is legal and then walk back over. So,
Any comments?
I do remember the original discussion.
Of course you do.
I remember.
I'm not surprised.
I remember the reasoning that council members then were okay with exempting Westwood. Same reasoning, golfers, and cigars and stuff. And then the parking lots of parks because of parents that might smoke. So I don't know. I've never had a really strong, never been a smoker, but I definitely know the effects, negative effects it can have. Secondhand smoke, of course. So definitely interested to hear what Jason has to say. The former parks director definitely had an opinion about this. And so maybe things have changed a lot in the last 10 years. So who knows?
Take it away.
Oh, well, out at Westwood, I'd say that probably when this was developed in 2008, that cigar smoking was the main hang-up on everything out at Westwood. Don't think that is a big problem now. I probably would like a little bit more in-depth survey to understand, and probably a discussion with our park board to make sure that we get full chance for input from those that frequent the golf course. But as a parks department, we're super interested in reaching the highest level as a healthy city as we can get. And I don't think that cigar smoking is as frequent out there as it once was. And of course, we don't allow it around the clubhouse or anywhere near the clubhouse, or if you're eating or having a beer out in their garden area or the pool. So a little bit more input would probably help, but I think it's very more possible now than it was. A lot more possible.
Okay. Councilmember Schuler.
I guess to that point about conducting more, I guess, survey response, is it possible that they could work, like the TSET could work with your department a little bit more closely to see higher numbers with that? Like, do you have tactics or ideas on how to reach patrons better?
Sure, we can send out we have all of our members at the golf course. We can send an email, and that way we're not invading
Game time.
Right.
Playing
their
time.
leisure time at
Yeah.
the course, or we can set out surveys for maybe hand out give an incentive of a token or something like that to put in the hit golf balls and take out the survey. And,
That'd be cool.
Get them a little input that way, and just do it as a special, for a certain amount of time. But like I said, I'm interested in, and I think that we need to include vaping at a certain point out in the parks, because that's not included right now.
We are definitely happy to do more surveys. We tried this morning. We would have loved to have more numbers, and that was one of the things we talked about. We're like, hate taking only 12 responses, but this is what we have. But we would absolutely love to do more if that would help make a case there. So definitely.
Councilmember Holman.
Interested in the comments from the staff too out there that
Yeah.
at work at Westwood, that comments that they made about having to pick up stuff and that they would prefer it not be. So that definitely holds some weight, I think, with the people that actually work there. I think.
Well, I really
No more.
appreciate your persistence in, bringing this back to us. And I think, we've seen a lot of evolution in habits and tobacco use, moving in a positive direction of less people using, which is great. So it just seems like the best way to move forward, I think, would be to try to get a larger sample size. I think that's important. I really like the idea of taking it back to the Parks Board as well, to get, just a
And we
different.
would invite the people at the golf course to
Yeah.
give their input.
Yes. But yeah, for sure, see if we can use the might of Norman's Park and Rec to get a little bit more robust sample size and try to gather some more input and just impact on employees as well. Councilmember Schuler.
Yeah, I just had one final question, and it's not related exactly to this, but the tiered structure for how the incentive grants, based on city, how were the size of city selected to say like rural, small, medium, large, and like Oklahoma City and Tulsa are in their own category, and because Norman is the third largest city, and so us being lumped in with a 30,000 plus group at 125,000 people seems a little bit
Yeah,
wonky.
that's a battle we do every day with TSET. They like to loop us in when it's convenient for them, but then when it comes to scenarios like this, they don't, and that's honest. Unfortunately, that's part of it is out of our reach. We don't make those decisions.
Yeah.
But I do feel the struggle because they often will have us work with Oklahoma County and Tulsa County and say, here, partner with them, do all this work, but you can't have the same amount of staff or the same funding or the same opportunities as them. So it is really unfortunate, and I wish you guys were considered in that same category, but unfortunately it is out of our hands.
Just kind of wanted to get that out there and
Yes,
say
I've
we're much
noticed it and
larger
I
than
complain
that.
about it all the time.
Well, I'm with you, and
Okay.
let's be supportive of them changing some of those classifications,
I
sizes.
make
but-
my voice heard
Yeah.
every time they loop us together when it's convenient for them. So
Councilmember Sudley.
I was just curious, Ms. Walker, you had mentioned that the fine is up to $500, but they said
Yeah,
that it
I
can
was
only go to
thinking so too.
100. So why is that? per the state law that we can only go up to 100.
I'll have to look at our ordinance. Some of these online, because we're going through the recodification process, haven't been updated with some of the new ordinances. So it's possible that's been updated, it's just not showing up on the
Well,
online.
and I wondered that as well. So, going back to collect more data also would give,
Per time to,
the legal department time to really look at what your recommendations are and how that works with what we currently have, because I noticed that discrepancy too in the fine dollar amount, so.
And I think personally, like, I'm all for it at parks and stuff where kids are at 100%. I'm just a little bit torn at Westwood, so.
Kids golf.
Yeah.
They do?
We saw 6
For the high
kids
school
this
teams
morning.
practicing.
Yeah, and we, it's mega cheap for your kid to bring, those are our future customers, those are the kids, the kids are the ones that are gonna be paying $30 green fees here in the future, so it only costs $8 for a full 18 holes for anybody that's under 18, so we love kids coming out and golfing. And we have a lot of junior programs and camps out there as well.
And it is $100 for that particular section of the code. This isn't a very unusual section, I just found it.
Okay.
Every single section in this part of our code has a different penalty. Usually all of our non-traffic misdemeanors that aren't jailable are $500.
Okay.
But this one section is different, so it is $100.
And is that,
That's max.
we're bound to that by state statute?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's not anything,
Right. It
that we've
prior to this,
created.
I think it was higher, and in some instances related to tobacco, we have different fines for first offense, second offense, third offense.
Yeah.
But I think that's more related to providing the minors.
What if you're vaping in your car and it's not tobacco?
It would depend if you guys include vaping into the ordinance.
Yeah, vaping just is anything.
So there's tobacco products, and then vaping. So if you were to include vaping into it, that would make a difference.
any,
You can still consume it, just can't smoke it. Just to be clear, that is the law. Get that question a lot, actually. Can I smoke this? Well, you can consume it, you just can't smoke it in this location.
okay. So is there some interest in, I hear you saying vaping is an issue that we
Well,
probably
and
want to.
I believe,
yeah.
Holly can tell me if I'm wrong, but you would have to include vaping to reach that highest level
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
healthy
Yeah.
city
Yeah.
status.
Well, I like moving forward on anything that can create a healthier city, so I think we got a path forward to have you all work with our Parks Department and try to see if we can get a little bit more robust sampling. And then that will also give our legal department an opportunity to review, how we would incorporate these things. So I think really the big question is, as far as committee members, would you like to see that come back here first and review it, or take it straight to a study session?
Study sessions.
Okay.
With me.
Sure.
Okay, all right. I think we
Thank you
have
all
a
so much. I
path
appreciate
forward.
your time.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for,
Persistence.
yes.
It's our job, right?
Hopefully with some enticing rewards, you might get a little bit more survey results.
That's always, everybody loves it.
Token for
You
golf
hand out a
balls,
free
that-
water
that
bottle
might be
for
enough.
survey.
Just an idea.
Yeah.
Oddly.
He's
on
full of
record now.
creative ideas,
Remember when they
yeah.
used to do surveys and give you free cigarettes to do the surveys? Just saying.
Oh, I did.
And,
They'd come around with to the bars.
Say right now, we cannot do that. You may, but we cannot legally.
So I just feel compelled to make a final comment too, that this sort of is a perfect example of a topic of discussion that got stalled. We were, working towards the next step in 2019, and we had that thing called a pandemic that sort of got in the way. So I'm really pleased that we could go ahead and have this conversation today and move this forward and see what the council wants to do. So thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
You guys getting us on the agenda.
All right, so the second item on the agenda is continued discussion regarding the city's boards, commissions, and committees. So this has been rolling around also since, I think, 2019. Has also has starts and stops for lots of reasons. So if you've had a chance to read the staff report, we have literally talked about this in 10/10/2019, 3/12/20, 12/12/20, 4/21, and 8/21. So it's we've definitely spent some time, and I went ahead and added this to the agenda today, even though Ms. Walker will tell us that we still have a ways to go before we get just the technical implementation that we're doing with the Muni Code. But since it has been one of the topics that has been a carryover now for several years and was on our goals, I felt like it was important to just revisit where we are, catch everybody up. It's been a hot minute since we talked about this, and see if we can maybe hone down even a little bit more where we are. So the first thing I want to say is thank you to Ms. Walker for really putting this all together and summarizing in a very digestible format of kind of where we are. So take it away.
Okay, and so what you have is the memo we had provided maybe in April of last year, but I went through all of my notes and from the discussion since then in April and in August, and added in red and green kind of where we left it. Because it is hard to track, and to me, it just feels better in one document.
Yes, this was great. And, let's just say we've had plenty of turnover on the council since we first started talking about this.
Yes,
So
rereading all of that really made that evident. Because I put your initials in my notes, and I was thinking, like, who is that? There were so many initials.
So this is a consolidation of a lot of different input. And would you just quickly review just what we're waiting for and why we can't really, we can make some, I think we can make some choices today, but what we're really waiting for now.
So we're going through a recodification process for our municipal code. If you've seen our code books, they're about this big, pretty hard to flip through, too big to do that, and really cumbersome to get through. But through this recodification process, we're going to get some enhanced access online. It's going to be easier to search. We're pulling the zoning ordinance, which is currently updated internally by staff, into our code, and they have gone through line by line. And Jeannie Snyder in my office has been working with them, and it has been quite a project. And with each department, they've gone through line by line every sentence in the code book to determine what references things that are out of date, what needs to be updated, and then to renumber it in a way that I think will be easier to add to later. That's sometimes the problem we run into, is you don't have so many reserved sections. How do you add to that code? And cleaning up any internal inconsistencies, because inevitably over the years someone has brought forward an amendment to one section not realizing it's mentioned somewhere else. And so just trying to get all of that up to date. And it's been a long process. We're working with MuniCode closely. We're getting very close to having the final draft, very close. We were hoping by the end of May, they're still going through it and making sure they've got everything right. And then staff will go through and review one more time. And then that'll be coming forward to council. And if you think the title on the charter review ordinance was long, just wait. I don't know that we won't list out every single thing in the title, but we will have to
re-adopt the entire code.
Yeah, you'll be re-adopting the entire code, so it's going to be a process. Yeah. Yeah, but it's exciting to get it all online in a way that's going to be easier for residents to look through, and you all, and when we update ordinances, we'll be able to update them and get them within that ordinance online immediately.
So that's really one of the reasons why we kept delaying adding this to the agenda, but it just felt like, we might as well just try to work through some of these things knowing that we're still not quite at the end of the
probably
road.
the hardest part is every section number is changing drastically.
Yeah.
So
you know.
Chapter numbers.
We're already so far into the review process, we hate to add anything. They've been holding all the ordinances you all have adopted for the past year and a half, I think. And those will be incorporated into that final draft, but pretty exciting.
All right,
Lots of work.
thank you.
Yeah, so. So if you want me to, I can go through this document with you. We had narrowed it down, I think, to 8 proposals. No, 6 proposals, and then we had talked about additional committees council may want to add. We started off kind of in 2019 talking about consolidation, and going through the notes, it looks like, you know, sometimes consolidation looked like a good idea, but then we worried about losing that citizen input, and so I think that's been something council has struggled with over the years. And we do have some consensus, I think, looking over the notes. The first proposal was to consolidate the Greenbelt Commission and the Planning Commission, and then to make Planning Commission appointments ward-specific. And so we had drafted language that would accomplish that. We talked about adding that to the planning, to the charter for the Planning Commission. And then eliminating Greenbelt Commission from Chapter 4 of the Code. In April of 2021, council was really mixed on whether or not we should move forward with consolidating these. Some liked that it would keep the Greenbelt Commission in an advisory role, but then we also had concerns about losing that input. And then if combined, you know, we wanted to ensure that some of those appointments would be represented on the plan. Some of those appointments, some of that knowledge, rather, in the Greenbelt Commission would be represented with appointments on Planning Commission. In August, it didn't seem like there was a lot of support for consolidation anymore. We talked about, and Councilmember Schuler, I think this was your suggestion, to consider reducing Greenbelt Commission meetings. And part of the concern with the number of committees we have is just the effort it takes to staff them, to draft the agenda. We follow the Open Meetings Act for all of these, so it requires minutes and you know, quite a bit of staff effort, and we don't have a lot of staff to do that, and the staff that does end up supporting these a lot of times are staff that are paid hourly, and so we're putting them into a situation of earning overtime, which we don't really have a budget for oftentimes, or having to kind of work out the kinks in their work schedule, and so we lose them during the day when we have other things to be doing. So we talked about that one. I think the concern about possibly reducing Greenbelt Commission meetings to quarterly instead of monthly is really how they fit into the development process.
Right.
Because certain developments have to get feedback from them before they can move forward. And so that, if it's a quarterly meeting, what if you don't have a quorum at one of those quarterly meetings? We certainly experience that a lot with various committees. I'm not picking on Greenbelt. So I think that would probably potentially have a negative impact on developments moving forward, being able to move forward in their process.
So I'll just jump right in there on this one. I think, because I'm pretty sure 10, yep, I've been around since the beginning of this, so, and of course, so is Councilmember Holman, but I think the one thing that we have had consensus about from the very beginning is really the issue of making the appointments to the Planning Commission ward-specific. I don't remember any conversation that didn't think that that was a positive step forward. And I know personally, I've just been lucky to have a representative from Ward 4 that has been appointed to the Planning Commission, and it has been such a positive relationship to be able to have that dialogue with the planning commissioner and get a different point of view of projects that are coming forward. So I think that's actually one of the better suggestions that we've made in all of this, is to do the ward-specific thing. So I'm definitely in favor in that, to keeping that. And I think there's been consensus for that all along. And I know that I'm pretty sure Mayor Clark has just informally tried to be very aware of that as she's been replacing planning commissioners, because we've had quite a bit of turnover on the planning commission. And I think she has not appointed, anyone from, so that the ward had more than one representative specifically because she, I think, felt like this was the direction that we were moving. So she's already informally kind of started that. I have to say that I've had my own personal reservations about combining, eliminating the Greenbelt Commission. That was just reinforced in a very strong way with the presentation that we just had from Mark Nanny. So I have really thought about, with the work that the planning commissioners already have to do, and as you said, as part of the development process, it just seems like we're taking out a really important piece that's almost gained more importance over the last couple years, not less. So personally, I'm kind of where we were in August of '21 and don't really see the real value of rolling that into the planning commission, because even if you just had 2 people, based on that expertise, there's no strength or voice there, really. So that's just how I think about that one. So, Councilmember Holman?
Yes, I feel the same. I feel like it could be difficult too if there's an opening on the planning commission for Ward 7, but I have to find somebody that's got that expertise because that's one of the ones that's missing or something.
Because you already have trouble.
Yeah, it could be hard to find us, or like I have somebody that I would like to that wants to do it, that's qualified to do it, but they don't have an expertise in open space preservation. Like, what does that mean specifically too? So I had some concern about how would be able to actually keep that position filled. I know it can be done. We have other commissions that have expertise, and we have people that serve on them. But yeah, that's kind of and the planning commission, in my observation, doesn't always ask those questions.
Yes.
Maybe they would if it was changed and that was, given to them that this is part of your mission now. But typically they haven't always asked about those types of things, or trees, or they've asked about the actual project itself and the function of it, but sometimes their scope, I don't know if they include those other things.
Councilmember Shiller?
Yeah, I think echoing kind of both of you with the sentiment that I think with having more understanding of the process now, and I think that the suggestion to throw out quarterly meetings or trying to consolidate meetings was more general than just this particular one, like looking at where we could think about it. So
Maybe other
but
places.
other places where we could think about, staff timing or, reducing staff time. But I do understand that, there is a very distinct application process for development coming forward. And I do think that we do need to stay within kind of those bounds to keep those things moving forward. But I also am not at this point in favor of consolidating Greenbelt into Planning Commission. I think that the work that they do is very specialized and I think very needed. And if we really want to talk about the continuation of trees and green space and things, it flows into what we kind of saw happening yesterday with all of the overflow of rainwater and things. And I think that at Greenbelt, those pieces kind of come up, not necessarily stormwater, but it plays into this conversation about how are we keeping green spaces, how are we keeping some of that within our development process, and what is that? And I think that some of the developments that have come forward recently, there have been several questions about green space and green belt spaces that have aren't thought through very well, I think, by developers. It's kind of oh, this is a green belt, or this is, but not accessible or not kind of well developed within the plat itself. And so I think having the Greenbelt Commission that is really focused on those areas and how they connect through our community is really important. So I'm kind of where I was, I guess, in August.
Okay. Do you have any comments?
So just to your point about some of the recent developments that have been presented, I am curious, what would that have looked like if there was somebody on the Greenbelt Commission in planning that could have discussed like some of these things, like how is this going to affect the canopy in this area or the
That's what they do
stormwater
now.
issues.
That's what they do now.
So then, I guess, if they're already doing that, then why wouldn't we be able to combine it then? If they're already,
Greenbelt Commission is already doing that,
That work, not planning
not
commission.
planning commission.
right, but I'm saying why is that Greenbelt work being presented at planning?
Yes, it's part of the report. I mean, it's part of the process of going to get to planning, the recommendation from the Greenbelt Commission.
So you're saying like, if we combine
Am I
it,
saying that right?
so if we combine it, it wouldn't be those two things together where you would have somebody presenting about the Greenbelt stuff
No.
while we're at planning?
Yeah, I think the idea was if we consolidated them, you would want to get some people on the planning commission with that kind of expertise and focus so that they
But
would
there's not a
start having
guarantee.
those discussions.
That's what, okay.
Right, and
Okay.
there's not the, I mean, were you present for Mark Nanny's presentation?
Mhm.
Okay. You know, it's to me losing, not just a person and the opinion of a person, but that collective work of the
Okay.
Greenbelt Commission, and they're, you know, willing to even do more. So, yeah, that's just, and, you know, I think the other thing is to remember that when we first started this conversation, one of the main pieces was to really be sensitive as a council to the staff support for all of these boards and commissions.
Right.
Even though we really recognize, you know, how important that work is and the kind of product that we get from our residents that volunteer on these boards and commissions, we can only go so far. So, you know, part of our issue today, I mean, let's kind of look at this a little bit more holistically. You know, we want to find those places where we can take some of the pressure off of our staff. And, you know, to your point, Councilmember Schuler, maybe there are other boards and commissions that don't have to meet as often, but this wouldn't be one of those because of the role they play in the development process. So, the other part of this is we also have a couple items on here to add committees when what we're really trying to do is be the most efficient that we can with what we already have, unless we've made the determination, and you'll see farther down into this, I mean, there is one or two that we've recommended that we do away from, that we don't do.
So if, okay, I'm just trying to wrap my brain
Yeah.
around this. So in
That's
the
what we're doing.
proposal, it's saying that maybe we would recommend to reduce the Greenbelt Commission to a quarterly meeting. But if we did that, then how would they be?
Well, we can't do that, is what we're saying, because of the role they play in
the planning?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So this is one where that's not gonna work.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
okay.
But there might be others.
But there might be others, so
Okay.
just keep that in mind as you
Okay.
go along, because, yeah, the staff support is obviously critical to the work that we do, so we want them to be able to sleep, so. All right, so I think, I mean, we're really gonna have to click along on these to get to the other two things that
Yeah.
we've got, so,
That was pretty clear.
yeah, okay. So, second one.
The next item is to consolidate the tree board, bicycle advisory committee, and parks board, and that started off just as, you know, these kind of have some overlapping interests probably. So maybe those could be consolidated. There was some support in April of 2021 for consolidating tree board and parks board. There has not been consensus, I don't think, to consolidate the bicycle advisory committee into those. I think everyone felt like that fit more into a transportation type committee. The Parks Board, we had proposed a charter change. I think on this and the Planning Commission, we could probably do some things in the ordinance, and then that, at some point later, we could bring that forward and kind of clean up the charter on those items, but if we wanted to move forward that way. But that would combine those two, Parks Board and Tree Board, into one, and the proposal was to add some expertise, I think, in the Parks Board for two appointees with expertise regarding urban forestry. And then we had language for appointees based on cycling, but we would remove that because the consensus was to include that with the Transportation Committee.
Any comments? Yeah, Councilmember Holman.
For Parks Board, I mean, I don't know, is there like a thing where express interests are put on there to say looking for, I mean, it'd be nice if all members had background in tree knowledge and stuff. Not required, having a couple that are required, but having on the application, like we're people that have expertise in these different things, including trees. Bicycle advisory, I definitely agreed not wanting to consolidate that one because we're adding bike lanes. We just got their feedback
Right.
on James.
I know,
Garner.
it's critical feedback, yeah.
And so, not even sure I want to consolidate with a transportation, just because they seem to be pretty busy with what they have.
I'm with you.
So, anyway, that's where I'm at on those currently.
And didn't you have a reason why it made sense to maybe combine tree and parks?
Yeah, we oversee both of those, so I
Okay.
think it would, if that's two of them, that would be pretty seamless.
So that would be an opportunity to get the same emphasis and work product, but
Yes.
let one staff support, one meeting instead of two,
Yeah.
supported by the same staff.
Correct.
Okay, I just
Yeah,
want to
and pretty
check.
much our whole department already shows up to, or all of our division heads shows up to parks anyways. So
Okay.
that would separate them from showing up to multiple meetings.
So that makes sense to you still?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, any other comment about that? Okay, I think are we good? Woof, all right, 3.
Nice. Okay. Proposal 3, this is the hard one.
Yeah.
Rescoping Animal Welfare Oversight Committee. That started as a ad hoc temporary committee to look, to oversee, I think, the construction of the adoption facility. It's continued long beyond that, and they are really active and I think meet every other month currently. And so we talked about rescinding that resolution because there's been support all along for making that committee, as it really is, permanent, as it's become, and codifying some things about it. There's support for rescoping kind of what their duties are. Obviously, it's not about the construction of the adoption facility anymore. It's much broader. And so some of the discussion has been about what their role would be. In April of 2021, we were talking about, and I think even back to 2019, promoting education, for spaying and neutering your pets, things like that, helping staff develop 2 social media posts per month, those kind of things. And there was some discussion, and my notes weren't great, so I apologize, in August about whether it might be a more appropriate fit as a subcommittee. That was coming on the heels of the bear incident. And so I think it was just, we're just trying to figure out where they fit in and all of that, because there's a lot of coordination with other state departments, State Department of Wildlife, and those kind of instances. But everyone seemed to recognize that, this is a committee that you all want. You want some professional expertise and resident input, but you also want rural representation, and that's not a requirement right now. And that's where we have a lot of issues with animals being dumped and, things like that. And so I know some of you have served on that committee as the
And
ex
currently
officio
there is
council
a
member.
council liaison to that committee too.
Correct. I think Councilmember Tortorello serves in that
Yeah.
capacity right now.
Councilmember Studley?
How will this look, or would we even need to still have this committee or commission if we have a public-private partnership in the
Yeah.
future?
That's a good question. I think you'll get some feedback on that from the committee members.
I mean, if we're still as the city wanting to have input, I think it's a good idea to have some
It
type
just
of.
might change the makeup a
Yeah.
little bit because you'd want to have whoever we're partnering with showing up to those meetings and giving those updates and maybe having a seat at the table. And so that's something we would have to look at when we move forward with that proposal.
In my head, I'm like, maybe they could staff and run that meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
And that would be awesome. Yeah, that would be great.
So maybe this
a lot
one
of sense.
needs to still hang out there until we figure that part out. Are we comfortable with that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yep.
Is that good?
because it is a total change of
Yeah.
the scoping and everything.
Yes, and yeah.
And we have things to
I mean, I think
figure
there's,
out,
I think
right?
there's a bigger conversation that has to happen first and then come back to this.
Okay.
You good? Okay. 4.
4 is eliminating the Children's Rights Coordinating Commission. That's an easy one. They haven't met in probably 5 years. That's something that if issues came up that really fits nicely into the Human Rights Commission, and so having a separate commission to address those issues, probably not needed, and that's been pretty clear all along. That's just something that's awaiting this rewrite of the code.
Well, I think we can, unless anybody has a question, I think we just dispense with that one too, as we've got consensus yet again to do that. Okay, 5.
Okay, increased committee membership on Board of Adjustment. This one is easy too. I think everyone agreed. This is kind of a funky commission. It has a requirement that for anything to be adopted, you have to have 3 votes. They only have 5 members. And that can be a challenge. So the proposed change would be to increase the number to 7, and then increase the concurring vote requirement from 3 to 4. And that seemed to be supported at both of our last 2 meetings, so that will be included in the final rewrite. And that's going to require changes in Chapter 4, but also in the zoning ordinance, which will now be in the code. So we'll get that done.
The other reason I like that is just having more consistency across all boards and commissions of a number of people.
Yeah.
Okay. We
Proposed-
good with that one? All right.
That's an easy one.
6.
Increased committee membership on the Norman Election Commission from 5 to 7. That seemed to be supported, and so that'll be included in the final rewrite unless you guys have changed your minds. No? Okay. Now the big one. What new committees to create? These would have to all be codified in Chapter 4. We'd want to have an idea of the duties, the frequency of meetings, and then whether or not we wanted any special representation, and then who is going to staff it from the city side. The proposed committees in 2021, one of them was the Core Norman Development Committee. I know in 2019, we had talked about some others that also came up again in August of 2021. The Senior Issues Committee, which I think we're going to include that in our operator agreement for the senior center. That makes a lot of sense, that they need that anyway for input for their facility, but broader senior issues as well. We talked about a youth advisory committee. We have a youth council now that's staffed through my office. And what they do is it's just an opportunity to learn about how the city operates. You all saw them in May when they came forward and I gave you the presentation on kind of what they do. But the idea, I think, with this committee would be to, instead of just educating them on what the city does, really try to engage them and get input on city policies related to youth issues.
So who would staff that? How would it change how it's staffed? I mean, I'm just going to say I want to be really cautious about adding anything.
If it replaces youth council, I would assume it would probably still be our office doing that, because we do youth council now.
So,
So this is just wouldn't be really an addition. It's a
Really,
rescoping of
renaming and rescoping.
to the. Okay. I'm in favor of that.
okay,
Okay.
good.
Citizens Transportation Advisory Committee, this is, I think, the one that we kept saying the Bicycle Advisory Committee could be rolled into. And we do have, it's the Bicycle Advisory Committee that's a subcommittee of CPTC, is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I was about to say it backwards. So whether or not we wanted to do that. And then a budget committee was suggested, I think, by Councilmember Bierman in 2019 to be a and then more recently we discussed whether it would be a subcommittee of the Finance Committee. And then, as I said before, the Core Norman Development Committee. Last time we talked about this, we talked about, of course, this was when we were still trying to get the Center City Ad Hoc Committee together.
And I can just hop right in on that one. I mean, when we first started talking about this in 2019, there was some discussion and something that I was interested in sort of fleshing out, but I really don't support that. We've been able to address these things in a different way, and the thing that I think I've learned from being on council is we have the ability to form an ad hoc committee to address specific issues, and Councilmember Holman and I have served twice now on the ad hoc committee for Center City Form-Based Code, which we're going to be discussing at the Planning Commission tonight. And just having a constant turnover on a standing committee like this just doesn't really make sense for the purpose at the time. So unless somebody else is invested in that, I think we can handle that in other ways. Also interested, Councilmember Holman, with the Bicycle Advisory Committee, do you see any reason to change that reporting mechanism through CPTC? Because it seems like that, how are they staffed?
They have, actually, for that committee, they do have staff representation from Parks and Public Works at those meetings.
Okay.
But they actually do their own agendas and minutes. I mean, they send them to staff to post, but I don't know how they con them into doing that, but that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the members does the minutes every month, and the chair
Okay.
submits the agenda.
Okay. So do you have any comments about how that's working? I mean, they literally have been invaluable more than once this year on feedback on projects, so.
Got like a backlog, too, of things for them to take up.
Yeah.
With the divided bike lanes.
Yeah.
Protected bike lanes, stuff like that. And they have been very active, and we've been building miles of new bike lanes, things like that, multimodal paths. I could see there being a need for a transportation committee, perhaps. Turnpike issues, street bonds, projects, sidewalks, bikes. But I'm not sure how I feel about consolidating them into one since they have such a workload already. Would that get bogged down even more if if it was included into a committee that also is looking at all of our bond projects or the turnpike issue or whatever it may be? So, yeah, I currently probably don't see a need to make a change as it is or add necessarily. I like the idea of a transportation committee, but we do discuss that in CPTC.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
anybody can come to it,
You have it.
you know. Yeah, so
Okay.
that could be something to keep thinking about. though.
And, I mean, yeah, it's great to talk about it, but what can we as a city do for OTA at the end of the day? So
Right,
I think that I'm agreeing with you that come to CP,
Yeah.
And it
Come to
could,
the
yeah,
meeting.
it could be a committee where we were like, okay, we're thinking about the next road bond. We want you to take a look at these proposed projects and give the council feedback on what we should do or what, this is what staff thinks.
And that literally could be an ad hoc
Yes, so,
option as well.
yeah.
And then, I mean, again, it's like, we have to feel pretty strongly about creating another structure that provides more staff time. So I think what I'm hearing is we can,
Especially if they're doing their own
yeah,
stuff, basically.
okay.
Yeah.
So keep the advisory committee, congratulate the person who volunteers to write the minutes. Thank them for their service. And transportation issues, again, could be handled directly through CPTC, or if there was some more long-term citizen input needed, we have the ad hoc route. Does that work for you? Okay. Did you, any comment at all? Just, you're good? Okay. You're not crying because we're not, okay.
It's a staff issue, but
Okay.
we feel really good about the CPTC. We love the DAC.
Okay.
It's working really well.
Okay, great, thank you.
So the budget committee, that's the only one that appears to be kind of new that is still, and I personally support that. That's actually one of the things that I wrote in my stuff about Daryl to talk about was that very specifically. I think it would be very helpful to all of us as council members to have some type of reporting that is word specific. And I don't know how that would work, but
So
I love the
again,
idea.
in the interest of staffing, because did you see the suggestion on here? I mean,
Of the
could that
finance-
somehow
yeah.
be a subcommittee of the finance committee, just like the bicycle
Yeah.
advisory?
Maybe we can get them to
Yeah,
do their minutes and stuff. too.
yeah,
Which one of you is going to promise to appoint someone that will do the minutes?
yeah.
And it wouldn't really
Sure.
necessarily need to be a full year-round thing either.
That was gonna be my suggestion.
Yeah.
Like,
just
when
through the
we're
budget
doing
process.
heavily invested in budget
November to June.
work, that's when we could be like doing that. And then the other months they're not meeting, but still appointed for, whatever the cycle is.
It seems like instead of going all the way through June, maybe just through the proposed budget.
Yeah.
So that you're getting input
Yeah.
Yeah,
and into the proposed
April.
budget and then, yeah.
yeah. So not a full month to month every.
Yeah.
June to March. The city manager's proposed budget comes out in April, so
June to March.
June to
prior
March or
to-
July to March would be the longest time frame, I would think. And we usually start budget discussions in November, so maybe they begin in September, October, or whatever, but.
So try to take a look at that being a subcommittee of the finance committee.
I
Okay.
think so.
I like it.
I like that idea, and, the other thing, I was reading about Oklahoma City and their budget adoption process, and they have public hearings, some type of public input piece, kind of in that same time frame, not just at the very end, but, as we're doing the work moving through council, there's also an opportunity for some kind of public input too, so
Which would be
if there,
great for the people's budgeting type
yeah,
things.
and so if there was a ward-specific representative, I mean, I can kind of see how you could get that rolling.
And it's just not us looking at the budget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A regular citizen.
And it's not creating another,
Yeah.
It would likely, I would think, be staffed by finance in terms of minutes and agendas, making sure all that gets done, but I think depending on whatever they're talking about, it could be multiple departments, coming to the meeting. Public Works, Parks,
Good with that
big
one?
budgets.
okay,
Legal
we get
department does not have a
everything?
big budget.
Yes, yes,
I think
yes,
so.
and yes.
One more.
Proposal 8.
Proposal 8, change every committee appointment in Chapter 4 to 3-year terms, three-year terms limits. I had to retype that 3 times. Cream.
Term limit.
Because I know it was confusing the way it was written initially. We also had another, and I think there was broad support for that. I think that's maybe the hardest part to write because we want to accommodate current appointments, and so we have to pick when that starts, and they'd have to stagger and make sure not everyone's turning over at one time. So that's something I've got to probably make a chart on.
And, yeah, and I also recall that we discussed briefly that we might want to leave some possibility that there are certain appointments that we have that are really technical in nature, and we might need to have some kind of language to allow for when you have someone that is really, has some institutional history and continues to contribute, and we don't have other people that necessarily can fill in there, that we want to make sure we don't just
Right.
let someone not be able to serve just because of, we have it so tightly written. I don't know how you do that either exactly, but
Yeah, and that was in my notes from the prior meetings as well.
Yeah.
So we'll work on that.
yeah. But I do really, this is another change that I think just provides a lot more continuity across boards and commissions and what the expectation is, and, does allow for really investing for a considerable period of time, but also makes way for getting fresh people to join boards and commissions, so, okay.
And there were just a couple other miscellaneous issues.
Okay.
Councilmember Studley had asked about the Norman Housing Authority and whether we could appoint an additional person to that. I looked that up in Title 63. That's all governed by state law, and it's a 5-person board. The other question was Chairman Chuck Thompson of the Economic Development Advisory Board had approached us about wanting to be able to appoint subcommittees, just if some highly technical issue or special issue came up. So that's
Ad hoc one too.
right, ad hoc subcommittees of the EDAP board. So that's something we can add in that language in Chapter 4 as well. And we could do it for all committees if we wanted to. Just that, the chair with the consent of a majority of the board could appoint a subcommittee. for a limited period of time to discuss them.
So then how does that
Particular issue.
impact staffing?
Yeah, that's the hard part. I mean, we have a resolution and a code provision that says everything is subject to the Open Meeting Act in Chapter 4, and so
If we got rid of
that's a
that.
challenge.
If we got rid of that,
No, we're not getting rid of that.
that would help a
Nice try.
lot.
Nope.
It is not required. We're going
I know.
above and beyond.
Yes, yeah, we are.
Yeah,
But,
I think that's a really good point to
Sure.
make, that we're doing this because it's the right thing to
We
do.
are more transparent than any other city in the state.
Yeah.
When it comes to that. Yeah. I would definitely be hesitant about giving all the committees the
Yeah.
ability to just
me too.
appoint subcommittees, because that could turn into a lot of.
Yes.
a lot.
And I will say EDAP does not meet every month. It's, I believe, every other month as needed. So
So
it
tell
wouldn't
us
be
about-
necessarily burdensome for that committee, but others that are already meeting consistently every month because they have topics every month they're working on, that could be a little more challenging.
Is there an opportunity for them or us to consider subcommittees when appropriate? I mean, like, not just give full free reign,
Yeah.
like within the code to say, you can appoint them whenever you
Right.
want and on whatever, or like, is there a way to
Upon
target
council-
that down, like
council
by
approval, you
council approval, then you can do it, like, because I feel like
Yeah.
that could get really, yeah, could get
Get out of
very
hand.
hairy. So if we can provide some oversight to the creation of that, but also the opportunity for them to ask for it when necessary, I think that that's maybe a good compromise.
Good compromise.
That
Yeah,
is.
that's good with that.
Yep.
Okay, we did it. Did we leave anything out?
I don't think so.
Nope,
Okay.
you got it all.
Woohoo! So, really, I think we've gotten consensus like 3, 4, 5 times now, so we don't need to revisit any of this. And the only thing that really is outstanding is waiting to move forward on any changes with the Animal Welfare Oversight Committee until the bigger picture is addressed, right? Okay, hooray.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for consolidating for us. I really
Oh, yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah. Okay, we're gonna make it, y'all. 20 after 5. So. Huh?
Dawn eats the show now.
Yeah, so the next discussion item is discussion regarding historic preservation of buildings. And I'll just give a little bit of context also for whoever's listening. We obviously have 3 historic districts in Norman. We have a local zoning ordinance overlay that actually is much more effective than any kind of ordinance that we have from the state and or for the federal government. But this also was a topic of discussion at our retreat last year that made the cut to consider. And I think the context at the time was it takes a lot of time, energy, and resources for a neighborhood to meet the requirements to establish a historic district. So that's number one. We have a downtown that's considered an historic district, but there's literally no protection for the buildings. They are eligible for historic tax credits, which is a plus, a big plus. And I think the other talking points at the time was, is there any kind of lighter touch that we might want to consider for maybe a house that's not in a historic district, but has some particular meaning? And I'll give you an example. So there's a house on Park Drive that I believe was moved from its original location, that where the first president of the university lived. And it's not in a historic district. It has no protection whatsoever, but is there something that could be done that might be a little different idea than just adding to the National Register of Historic Places? Because that's also a pretty significant process to go through. So that was the discussion. So we just really wanted to open up the conversation today, and thank you, Anna E. Starr, for
So
hanging in there.
With that, I will
Yeah.
just say, I am not an expert on historic landmark ordinances.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of research for this earlier this week to put this together.
So I'll try to go through this quickly. Historic district versus historic landmark. A historic district is an area of structures that are all related aesthetically or historically, usually by physical development, i.e. a plat or something. And they're protected and they're by public review from alteration and demolition. Typically, they're residential. A historic landmark can be a structure or an area that has significant historical, cultural, or architectural meaning to the community and has been given legal protection from alteration and destruction. And these landmarks usually have a variety of underlying uses. So, for example, you have the Calvary Baptist Church in Oklahoma City is a landmark, but so is the Union Soldiers Cemetery. So they're both landmarks, and obviously one is an area and one's just one single structure. I did use Oklahoma City primarily for my research. I contacted the State Historic Preservation Office, and Oklahoma City does have the active historic landmarks program in the state, and they have a lot of experience with it. Their historic landmarks program works in conjunction with their historic preservation ordinance. They are kind of melded together. The rules are similar to the historic district. You have to have a review and issuance of a COA in order to do alterations and demolitions. And the alterations to the exterior of the building must meet the historic preservation guidelines. And in their ordinance, the landmarking of a building can either be initiated by a property owner or by the city. And in talking to via email to the Oklahoma City Historic Preservation Officer, she has indicated that almost all of them, it sounded like 9 out of 10 of them that they've landmarked, that have been done hand in hand with the support of supportive property owners. That they weren't, they've tried once or twice to do some landmarks on uncooperative property owners, and they have not worked out. Where might we get properties to landmark? Where might we look to think about landmarking? Well, one possibility is to look at the National Register of Historic Places that are in Norman and see which ones might be a good fit for that. I will caution you that not every National Register place is maybe appropriate to be landmarked. I.e. there's one on the list that is somebody's personal house, and it is on the National Register. But the other place to look is properties that are culturally or historically significant in Norman. And as Council Member Hall mentioned, it does take time and money to get designated on the National Register of Historic Places. You're talking several $1,000s to do that, and when you get done, you don't have any protection. So there are places that I've had citizens contact me, and they assume that they are protected, and they are not. And they're something that has been around Norman forever, and they just assume that they're protected, and they're not. Here's a list just so you can see the different types. One of those houses that people thought was protected and was not was the Bavinger House, and it was demolished by the property owner, most unfortunately, which was not only a Oklahoma treasure but an international treasure that was unfortunately demolished. But there's also on here you can see that there's stuff that's located on the University of Oklahoma campus. There's the post office, the Sooner Theater, the Santa Fe Depot, the old public library, our park resources over here, more Lindsay. So there's a variety of things that are on the National Register of Historic Places. How could we do a historic landmarks program? I just briefly reviewing it with legal staff, it looks like we probably would just add to and expand to the historic preservation ordinance that we already have. You'd have to add a process for designation of the landmark, and then you'd have to add a process for reviewing historic landmarks. We'd also probably utilize the same historic preservation guidelines, but you'd have to probably do some tweaking because you're going to be dealing with commercial buildings and other structures that aren't covered by our current guidelines. Obviously, this requires more research to determine a path forward if that is what you also wish. And then I just briefly want to talk about the pros and the cons. The pros are it would provide protection to structures that are significant to the community. It could encourage historically appropriate renovation of historic structures, which would provide protection to those investment dollars. In particular, I'm talking about historic tax credit projects. We've had one historic tax credit project. That would be the Logan Apartments that Brent Swift did. But in talking to Oklahoma City Preservation, the city there has been active in working with developers and helping them to leverage money to restore significant buildings. And then in that process, they also landmarked them at the same time so that they were getting the renovations done. And then the building was up to this historic, restored to its historic grandeur and then landmarked so that it would protect those investment dollars. And then the cons, of course, would be is if it's designated as a landmark, there's additional processes for the property owner whenever they want to make alterations. They would have to go through review process. And obviously it would require more city staff and time, maybe additional personnel to do it. And then it is difficult to designate landmarks without the cooperation of property owners. It's politically speaking, it's a difficult thing to do. And so those, oh dear Siri, she's really Siri's giving me fits today. I'm not sure why. And with that,
So bossy.
she is. It seems like I say her name a lot, and not really. Sorry about that. So with that, if you have any questions, I can try to answer them.
Well, thank you so much for putting that together because it actually gives me some other kind of things to think about. And so I want to touch on a couple things and then just hear your feedback. Like I said, I really just intended to meet my responsibility as a committee chair to get this on at least open for discussion and for further consideration. Since it was one of our goals that we just hadn't quite gotten to yet for timing and other things. So the first thing I want to say is, you really laid out how important it is to continue to educate our community that just because this treasure trove of buildings that I think has a lot of support with the community that think that they're protected because they have this very prestigious designation of being listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And our own zoning ordinance is much more robust in protecting properties than any of the properties that you've got highlighted on the slide. And I think one of the reasons this came up last summer is because we were having a pretty robust conversation about the old post office. And I think we all know the outcome of that. It is now in private hands, and we have been at least informally assured by the current property owner that he intends to respect the building and respect the exterior of the building, and we certainly hope that's true. He does have the added benefit of having historic tax credits available to him if he so chooses. But as far as having any expectation on the part of the community to actually preserve the exterior of their building, there is nothing that the city has in our back pocket to make that possible. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. And then I also wanted to point out, when you were talking about historic tax credits, which are really significant, they were used for the First National Center in Oklahoma City. That is
Awesome.
awesome. And I'm
no other
assuming
word
it's
for it.
been landmarked.
I'm assuming it has.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
I haven't looked to see.
And you pointed out the Logan Apartments, who Brent Swift developed that property and successfully was able to take advantage of historic tax credits to bring that building back to life, which I think is definitely added to the texture of the community. We have another project on Gray, the Standard. That building is not, I don't think it's listed on here, but it is a historic building, the old Norman Auto Parts building. And that developer was also able to take advantage of historic tax credits to make that project
Forgot
go.
about that one,
Yeah. Is it listed on the National Register?
No.
No. So there's an example of, there may be other historic properties in Norman that might meet the criteria to be eligible for historic tax credits. So number one, that's something that I would like to look into a little bit more of how that works and how it would be a benefit for a property owner that might be torn about what to do with their historic property, to have that as an option, even if it's not listed or designated on the National Register. And to your point, all of this discussion for me personally is based on that cooperation with the property owner. It's not trying to impose something else. It's elevating the conversation about the treasures that we do have in Norman that are not protected, that there may be a path forward to, have tax credits available, maybe other things available. So just quickly, I did my own research, and the traditional ways that there's public support for historic preservation is at the national level, at the state level, and we have a very active state level office that I know you work with all the time. But really, the most effective ordinances are done at the local level, and I think we've done a really good job. Ms. Starr has been the leader in overhauling the guidelines. That was a 2-year project. I mean, it's a tremendous it's a tremendous part of her job description that does take up a lot of time. But I think, that's certainly been effective at protecting properties when these other two methods don't work. Some of the other things that I'd like to throw back into the research pile is there are private ways to go about doing this. And we have an example that I'm aware of in Norman, and that's doing easement or deed restrictions. And I think that might be something that would be palatable to a property owner perhaps. And the example I'm thinking of, and I don't have the house number, but it's on the south side of Lindsay.
1010 Chautauqua.
Oh, yeah, 1010 Chautauqua. And that is a beautiful example of mid-century architecture. It hadn't really been touched or ruined in any way. And it's had a massive remodel. I think it's in private hands now, but it was so important to the property owner that the property owner had a deed restriction placed on that property so that if you wanted to buy it, you knew that you could not significantly alter that property because it was so important to that person to move forward with the protection for that house. So I think that's something I'd like to look into just a little bit more. And again, I think this would be some kind of program or path where it would be building support with property owners of what the advantages are to protecting our historic buildings in Norman. And then I also came across another concept that I found in North Carolina, and it's called the Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District. Are you familiar with that?
I've heard of neighborhood conservation districts. Yeah.
Well, like I said, I just was kind of a quick look at what might be out there, and the differences and the purpose of that is to preserve, revitalize, protect, and enhance significant older areas or historic structures. But the difference is it is a little bit of a lighter touch. It's not just a redo of a zoning ordinance. They regulate fewer features. They focus on significant character that define those features, but they don't get into a lot of the really nitty-gritty details that the Historic District Commission considers. So I'm interested in throwing that back in the research pile too, to see if that's anything that might be of interest. And then I found another one that's called a Small Town Character Overlay District. So that's my 2 cents. What do y'all have to say about it? Councilmember Schuler?
I'm really interested in the last two things that you just threw out, the neighborhood conservation and the small town character overlays. I think particularly because, when we look at where our current like historic districts are, and I think almost all of these that are listed on the historic national register are in Core Norman
Yes.
or in Ward 4 as well, but just thinking about some of our other neighborhoods that maybe don't rise to a historic district, but thinking about some of the places in my ward, in I guess on the other side of Ward 4, reaching out kind of as we kind of go in concentric circles out from the city, thinking about how do we provide some protections for some homes that are, built in the 1950s or, things like that, like my home was.
Well, you literally have a neighborhood that was inventoried, what year?
Yeah,
In Ward 2.
As we've gotten older, as the community has gotten older, anything that's 50 years or older qualifies to be a survey done and can become a historic district. So there are some districts, like you said, I live in the same neighborhood as you do. But one of the ones that people aren't aware of is Brookhaven. It qualifies, and the original Brookhaven, and it would.
I lived in a historic home there too.
But the conservation district, as you said, takes a little lighter touch to it. And it tries to preserve the overall character of the neighborhood. So you don't have a lot of tear downs and rebuilds that are not in character with the neighborhood, but it's less about and the character might also have to do with just it's a tree canopy street with a boulevard and and trying to maintain that.
And I'm thinking and I'm wondering, because I don't know too much about this and I will need to do some more digging and research and hope that this will kind of come back, but as we think about some of those older houses in some of those districts where, they're like the 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath, kind of some of these homes that get bought up for, rent houses, or they're around the university and it's kind of a location thing. I'm just thinking about, and I know that there are several in Ward 2 that have been demolished and then built larger homes on two lots. And thinking about affordable housing and thinking about how we maintain character, I think that these are really attractive to me in keeping with kind of the feeling and the vibe, I guess you could say, of those districts or those areas and neighborhoods. So I'm really interested in pursuing some of these ways to kind of think of that, and specifically because I'm wondering how much, having it as a historic district versus having a lighter touch would provide opportunities for affordable housing in a way that, going the full scope would provide much more cost and price people out of those homes, whereas would these be able to keep costs a little bit lower and continue to kind of think about that housing mix that we're so worried about. So I think that these might be some interesting and viable options for some of those broader conversations that we're having.
Any comments?
No, I agree. Like having an option for property owners to. I mean, there was a house that got demolished on Jenkins this week, and people were posting about it, and I was like, well, it was for sale forever, and it was auctioned off because nobody wanted it. And now you're upset that it's getting demolished. I mean, what do you want anybody to do? I mean, nobody wanted it. And the person that finally did get it didn't feel like it was...
He didn't want it either, or she didn't want it either.
Didn't want to spend the money to fix it up or whatever it was going to take, I guess. So, I mean, but giving property owners... Maybe there's even property owners that don't know the full extent of the history of their property. There's several houses. There's one on George Lynn Cross Street. There's the Bud Wilkinson house on Main Street. They're not in historic districts, but they're old. They have significance.
And some of the, as you say, some of the people are not so interested in being in a district. One of the ones that I first did when I came started working here was Timberdale, because that's such a unique street. And I was worried that the procession of demolitions were going to continue down the street. But I have to tell you, those neighbors indicated to the historic surveyor, who does not come into their house or anything, just she does the work from the street, that they were not interested in becoming a historic district. But you know, they might be interested in a conservation district, so yeah.
There's houses getting torn down in that neighborhood
Jeff,
now.
anything?
Is there a house getting torn down in that neighborhood?
Well, a couple have been.
Yeah.
The one that took out all the trees and everything along the street. There's another one that they didn't remove the trees. So.
Yeah, it's just,
Yeah.
that's just the tension in the older part of Norman. So, okay, well, again, just unless you have any other comments, just to move this along, I think what I'd like to see, and you know, you all will be carrying on, but what I'd like to see is just exploring, you know, all of the things that we talked about today. The other thing that I wanted to mention, that we can throw on the list too, is I came across places that also had demolition review programs. I can think of another neighborhood that actually was incorporated, our most recent expansion of the Chautauqua Historic District, wanted to do, they successfully did a downzoning petition, and they were adamant about not wanting to become part of the historic district, which really for them was a pretty easy process because an inventory had already been done, and it was one of the easier paths to accomplish that. But once houses on their block started being demolished without them having any warning about it, that got their attention, that at least if it has historic designation or historic district designation, doesn't mean you can't do it, but it does allow for a little bit of a review. And so I was also reading about, again, a lighter touch really, and you're not incorporating everything into a historic district that has the most restrictive zoning, but for concerns in the community about these places coming down, you know, if it's, I don't even know what that would look like, but that there could be a little bit more than a demo permit and it's down the next day. If it's a certain age, or it is on an inventory but not protected as a historic structure, I mean, I think there's a lot of ways that we might be able to go about that to at least take a breath before we take it down. And just the whole education piece of helping people understand the significance of the property that they might be purchasing. So those were just all the thoughts on my mind. So to me, what makes the most sense is to give you plenty of time to, you know, work on some of these things and probably have it come back to oversight. Is that what you all want to do?
I think so.
Okay.
Is there a timeline?
I don't know. What do you all want to do?
3 months, 6 months, what are we talking?
Let's say 3. Yeah. And if you need more time, just say so. Okay. Any other comments or questions about that one? All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And finally, the last item on our agenda is a staff report on homeless activity, and I think you already have the report attached to your documents. So, Ms. Craig, take it away.
You know, the numbers speak for themselves, fairly consistent. No rhyme or reason as to, you know, full one night, half full the next night. Definitely does not tie with the weather. What we have done since the 1st of May is that we have increased the availability of case managers. It takes 4 people to get people checked in, to do the COVID screening, to bag the belongings, to get the intake. And so we're having 6 to 7 there a night, because what would happen is someone would want to talk about housing, and we were so tied up with checking them in, we say, okay, we'll come get you, and then they'd be asleep. And so this is allowing, you know, a lot more access to the case managers that were there. And in addition, we developed another questionnaire kind of thing that gives us a better picture of how ready, as far as, do you have a photo ID, do you have a birth certificate? And so we have been doing those, have not had as many take advantage of that as I would have hoped. We've had about 25. And those have now gone over to the Housing Authority. The Housing Authority is seeing which program would be best. Obviously there's the regular Section 8, but then there's Section 811 mainstream vouchers if you're 62 and below with a disability, or the emergency housing vouchers for persons that are homeless. And so there's different programs, obviously public housing and senior housing and things like that, that they're trying to find the best fit for a long-term, successful housing solution. The different agencies are working to, as the person gets identified, we're pairing them with a case manager from an agency, whether or not it's going into their program or a program that they have that is similar to that. And so it's taken time. But, there's probably 10 or 12 that I can think of right off the top of my head that most likely will be housed here in the next month or so.
Great.
So, we did issue the RFP for the operator.
Hey.
It went out on Tuesday. And so it was directly mailed to the different agencies, and legal notice ran in the paper yesterday, so.
For a shelter?
And we've been in contact with Mindy at the transcript that she's doing the piece.
What's the timeline to?
Oh, gosh, I don't know.
Okay.
I think it's 3 weeks.
Okay.
Let's see here. I want to say it is July 6th is when
Okay.
it comes back.
And do we have any interest, or has anybody inquired, or?
I have not had any official inquiries. I know
Okay.
that April has talked
Okay.
about possibly, collaborating with another entity to pull something together, so.
Okay.
And that's really the only discussion. That was several weeks ago, so.
Okay. Okay. And then the other thing that you had mentioned was the first resource event of the COC on May 31st. I attended that myself, and it was really great to see all of quite a few participating COC partners be in the same room in a little different format than, I'm assuming some of the folks there don't participate regularly with the COC team. And so it seemed to be a very positive energy event, a lot of exchange of resources, and just a brief summary of this is what we do, this is, how we can coordinate with other people. I think there was seemed like a lot of interaction after the meeting of, exchanging information. And I don't really have anything to compare it to, but it did seem like the COC board with new leadership is really trying to press the reset button and move forward in a renewed commitment to sharing information. The other thing that I saw, just anecdotally, that I was so pleased to see is that McFarland Church has taken upon themselves for years to provide a resource list, and they have a very dedicated, several members that are completely devoted to keeping that up to date. And another community partner has digitized that now, so it's not just a PDF that you print off. He has literally uploaded it with pins on a map and all kinds of things, and I was just so pleased to see that, because that resource list is great, but a lot of people don't know about it. So that was a positive move too. So, anything else you wanted to highlight?
The last night of the shelter is the 26th.
Yes.
The morning of the 27th will be the last occupancy, and then we're gonna swarm in there to clean it out and we've got 4 or 5 boxes of masks that are not the nice ones. They're the ones you have to tie and everything. So there's lots of supplies that we got, primarily donated from emergency management and stuff like that from the get-go, that we kind of just have stashed up there, getting the cots out of there. We'll have 4 or 5 that are brand new that if the ones hold out that we have till then, that we'll just coordinate with another entity to get rid of those. The ones that are being used pretty much need to be tossed.
And it is my understanding that you are actively communicating every single night that this is the timeline. So
Yeah.
you're trying to make
Signs
as
are
many
posted. We
people
talk
aware
to-
as possible.
To the
Okay.
guests every single night.
Okay.
Say if this isn't a convenient time for you, can we meet you at the library during the day, or just trying to make it very convenient for them. So,
Councilmember Holman?
Has there been any feedback from them about closing the shelter? Like, have any of them asked why, or
not really.
anything, or concerned, or
there's
upset, like you guys ruined it for us, or something like that?
No. Several people that I've been kind of shocked that really weren't. To me, I consider them more of a high functioning, for lack of a better word, that I figured they'd want to say, talking with them, they're like, yeah, whatever, And then when we had the shelter previously, when the signs went up that it was closing, everybody wanted to talk. That really hadn't happened this time. But a couple of them, females, that I figured that, they're just like, nah, I don't know what, I thought I might just go to Oklahoma City. And I'm like, but if you want to stay here, we can make that happen. Well, I don't know. I don't really know what I want to do. And there's a lot of wishy-washy. I think that'll change in the next week or so once they realize that there's about 10 days left. And, just because the shelter closes doesn't mean that we're going to stop that effort. That we have ways to, and most of them do go to food and shelter or go to Salvation Army that we'll still keep pursuing.
And that's the one encouraging piece, is that this increased commitment to communicating with one another, I think, comes at just the right time, because I think we do see quite a few folks at the night shelter that are, possibly getting a meal at food and shelter or taking advantage of some other things. So
it's just finding the housing.
That's
the tough
that's
part.
our task.
The housing navigator that is at the housing authority that we're paying for with CARES Act funds, he's getting his feet on the ground and really going out and starting to really work one-on-one with different landlords to start that relationship building of, let's talk about Section 8 and the benefits for you in that. So,
Councilmember Studley?
I just want to make a couple of comments for record. The first is, when this closes, we will have an influx of people at night. So community members listening, it's not that new people are coming to Norman, it's just that they now no longer have a place to lay their head at night. The other piece to this is there have been some comments made about a lot of people being around food and shelter in the morning. Which I know there are some campers that are around there, but there's an influx in the morning. And I want people to understand, because there's this rumor that people are being bussed in and dropped off from Oklahoma City. And I want to make sure everyone who's listening understands this. There are people being dropped off at food and shelter, but it's not from Oklahoma City. It's from our own warming shelter here in Norman. They're being picked up around 6:30 to 7 and dropped off at food and shelter so that they can eat breakfast, but they're not being bussed from out of the city. So we do not have a new influx of new homeless people that aren't from here, and I just want to make sure that everyone understands that. So when the shelter closes and you see people being driven around by services like Norman Caravans, they're just local people being transported around town. And that's all I was saying.
Thank you for making that point. Any other comments? Councilmember Holman?
Just want to thank Jim for letting us use your space.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sean's
As long as you
a little
could.
harsher than we expected.
Yes.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, he's been amazing to work with.
Yeah.
So
Thank
couldn't have
you
done it without
very,
him.
very much. Yeah. That's what a community partnership is all about.
Thank your city manager.
He's a good
That's
one.
what started.
Yeah. Okay, any other comments? Then this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.